original sin. And it doesn't even matter how intelligent or kind you may have been, you just can't win. It was all over before it began. You were doomed in the fall of man.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm Matt Dillahunty, joining me this week, Don Baker.
Hey,
how are you?
Good to be here. Good to see you.
We are live, as we are almost every Sunday. Today's May 24th, 2009. It's Memorial Day weekend, and I'll hit that in just a second. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism, the separation of church and state. The website for the ACA is at the bottom of your screen. You can go there to find out. It's www.atheist-community.org. You can go there to find out more about what the ACA does, including our sister program, The Nonprofits, which airs as a podcast every other Saturday. You can go to nonprofitsradio.com for more information about that as well. There's a frequently asked questions page on the website where you can go to find out answers to frequently asked questions. There's also ways to get in touch with us. Message boards, email, the main email address being tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-host, people behind the scenes, and we can't possibly answer all of them, believe me. The amount of email coming in now that we're streaming the show is huge. This show is available for download audio, and the video portion for the old shows is up at Google Video. For the new shows, Don's been uploading them to Blip TV, and you can also watch it live streaming at the ustream.tv link that they'll put up on the screen here in just a moment. You can, in addition to the websites where you can find out more about our various endeavors, like our lecture series, the first Sunday of the month, or Sunday morning brunches, the happy hour on Thursdays, and after this program's over on Sunday evenings, we get together to go to dinner at Threadgill's. The address will be up in a second. It's 301 West Riverside Drive. You can find out most of that information, if not all of it, at the website, and I'm going to stop the announcements now. So for all those people who were complaining that the announcements took too long,
right?
There's the condensed version. Yeah,
our regular listeners is like, ho hum, I live in Canada and I can't go to any of this stuff. And
yeah, but it's for people in the Austin area. We'll talk throughout the show as we take callers. Don, of course, has got a topic that we're going to go through real quick. We've already got some callers on hold, and we'll take more as the show goes on, and we'll probably bring up specific things throughout the show. As I said, it's Memorial Day weekend, which is, in the United States at least, an excuse for people to take a 3-day weekend and go out on a boat and get drunk and blame their deceased relatives and war heroes for it.
Blame?
Well, it's the excuse.
Credit, maybe.
Actually, Monday, credit, yes. Credit. Monday is Memorial Day in the United States, and it's a day devoted to honoring the fallen heroes who have, protected our freedoms. And we are extremely proud of their efforts that allow us to do this show. And, I'm not going to get all uber patriotic and America's #1 and all that stuff. But as prior military myself, and there are other prior military in the audience, to those of you who are serving, thank you very much. And to those of you whose relatives have served and have died or lived to protect our freedoms, thank you as well. Enjoy your holiday weekend. And that's all I've got on Memorial Day.
Okay. See, I knew you couldn't let the announcements go. Okay. All right. Well, today I would like to talk about the greatest hits from the Bible. And what I mean by that is perhaps the things that have had the greatest impact on our culture. And this is such a big topic, I think I'm going to be doing this for multiple shows, but today I want to focus on Genesis. And there's a lot of reasons for this. I think one reason is, we have a Republican congressman in the United States introduce a resolution to make 2010 the year of the Bible. So that's something that's come up. And he claims that it's had a profound impact on shaping America into a great nation. And I certainly think that's stealing credit, but he certainly thinks it's had a great impact. And in Texas here we have Bible literacy courses required to be taught, if required to be offered at least, in Texas schools. And those classes, I believe, are going to be focusing on things like the impact of the Bible in literature. But I think that that's actually kind of a minor impact. I think that we've had much bigger impacts in our culture, and So I wanted to focus on that. So by greatest hits is sort of the biggest impact, that sort of thing. There's a little bit of a pun. Much of the impact from the Bible has been negative, and I think that very often these things get spun and they get downplayed, and we're going to bring them out. It's my belief, and I think most of the atheists in our group, that the Bible is mostly silly stories that are taken way too seriously, and the fact that people take them seriously is how they get their impact. So another thing to say is that I'm not a biblical scholar. I'll probably make some mistakes today. Call in and correct me if I make a screw up. I'm sure Matt will jump on me if he's got his leash out to rein me in. But so we're going to focus on Genesis. I won't be doing all of the books of the Bible. We'll be here forever. But Genesis is unusual in that it has a lot of unquestioned lore. It has a lot of God spoke this, God spoke that, and a lot of people just sort of say, well, you know, we're just going to take that as it is, and I won't focus too much today on the goofy stuff in Genesis, although there's a lot of it there.
The interesting thing about the resolution that they proposed, though, is there was, I think P.Z. Myers, for example, suggested somewhat jokingly that we should go ahead and do it and get it over with, and then this will be the year of the Bible, and then we're done with it.
Never again.
And we won't have to do that again. And there was other Barney Frank, said was 2008 the year of something else, and will 2012 be the year of the Quran?
Right.
These types of resolutions get proposed all the time, and sometimes they pass, and most of the time they're meaningless. There have been all kinds of year of this and day of this and in honor of this, and I wouldn't have a problem with this in particular, as apart from the fact that it's a time-wasting measure, and I'd prefer that they were going about the business of actually doing the business of running the country and not saluting holy books. But there's a passage towards the end of the proposed resolution that says that for 2010 they want the president to encourage everyone to live by the standards of the Bible.
Uh-oh.
And
that's crossing the line.
That's why I don't think this thing would ever actually get passed, because I would hope that if not the president, then at least, I don't know, his legal counsels would be able to say, you know what, this bill is probably one of the most blatant violations of the First Amendment ever. We want the president to tell everybody in the United States that they need to live by the Bible for a year. Yep. It's just not going to fly. If you want to have a year, if you want to play up to your pundits and have a year dedicated to your particular holy book or whatever, you probably could have got away with it if you'd have left out that one little section. Say, this book has made a big difference in a lot of people's lives and it's been important. I wouldn't have gone so far as to say that the effects were positive, because I think Don is going to contradict that a little bit today. But when you start saying that this is a significant book that everyone should make an attempt to live by, or however they phrased it, you've gone way too far.
Well, I think it's worthwhile to understand its impact, and trace back some of the things that we sort of accept in our culture back to these goofy little stories. And it's like, why do that? Why not have something based on reality instead of fiction? Why build a society around fiction? So that's my point. So the Genesis, what I'm going to focus on today, is really kind of in three kind of parts. The first part is a creation story. The middle of it is this long genealogy of these people had these kids and blah, 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 and they're kind of tracing down a family line. And at the end, the last third of the book or so is the story of Jacob and his family, especially Joseph. And this is sort of the beginnings of the Israelites. Now, in the Bible, there's a lot of kind of category errors in the sense that you often have a person who is conflated with the family that he begets, right? So it becomes, Israel is a person, but then he begets the sons of Israel, right? And these are called, Israel as well, and the tribe is called Israel, and the nation is called Israel, and the place is called Israel, and these things are very fluid in the book.
Well, it's a patriarchal structure.
Right.
Israel becomes the father of the tribe of Israel, and Judah becomes the father of the tribe of Judah, and all of them.
Right. It's all about these patriarchies, right? And another place where you get a lot of category errors is if somebody is cursed very often that curse flows down to their children. And there's not a notion of punishing the person who did the crime. It's a notion of, well, your whole seed or whatever is. So the middle part of the Bible is kind of a breeding log.
Genesis.
Of Genesis, yes, of Genesis. And it's the focus on the male, the patriarchy. And if I were God and I wrote this book, first off, I don't know if I'd focus so much on on who begat who, right? Because I don't know, it's not that interesting. And if I were really going after a breeding log, I'd include the women in there too, to keep track of the women, because they're just as important. They contribute just as much, if not more, to the children. Anyway.
And more important to Judaism, because you're a Jew if your mother was Jewish.
Yeah. I guess there's a lot of that, right? There's also a lot of incest in Genesis, which is pretty interesting, I think, because very often they go through these begats, and then there's this story about Abraham who married his half sister and worked a scam based on that a couple times. So that was pretty interesting. Anyway, so as far as the impact on the world, I want to focus today on the derived religions that came out of Genesis, that kind of hook into Genesis. I want to talk about stories that are used to blame and control people. I want to talk about justified thuggery and just so accounts. So I don't know if we're going to get the last one or two, but we'll try.
Okay.
So derived religions. I claim that just on the book of Genesis you can find the hooks for Judaism, which is not a big surprise, because Genesis is the first book of the Torah, which is the holy book of the Jews. We get the hooks for Christianity, we get the hooks for Islam, we get the hooks for Mormonism, and we get the hooks for Raelianism. All of them in Genesis. So that's pretty interesting. Not to say all of it. Matt's suppressing a giggle. Go ahead and giggle, Matt.
No, it's fine.
It's okay.
It's fine.
Okay, so I'm gonna hit these real quick in the order of the founding of the religion. Judaism was going pretty strong around 1000 BCE, before the Common Era, and the big things in Genesis for this are the naming of Jacob, who is one of the scions of the families. God names him Israel in Genesis 32:28 and again in 35:10. The name doesn't stick apparently. But here's where we start to get the identity of Israel, and Jacob becomes Israel, and his children become the 12 tribes and such. One of his children is Judah, who is strongly associated with the Jews. Israel is actually a bigger umbrella than just the Jews. So there are people who trace their lineage back to Israel who are not Jews, which is interesting. And that's Genesis 49. There's kind of the account of Judah and all the different children, kind of listing them out and identifying them as tribes. Another important thing is this notion of a promised land, which happens earlier in the Bible in Genesis 12, 1 through 7, and maybe I can talk about that. This is back where Abraham is just getting his start. He's one of the main guys coming through, and in Genesis 12, starting with 1, he says, "Now the Lord had said unto Abram," he was called Abram then, "Get thee out of the country and from thy kindred and then from my father's house, go into the land that I will show thee, and I will make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and I will make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." So this is basically one of the places in the Bible where God sort of says, okay, here's a bunch of land that's yours, and it's for yours and your nation, your tribe, your family, and this is mentioned several times. Also again in Genesis 15:7 and 15:8 to 21. So these three things taken together are really sort of some of the foundational pieces of Judaism in the Genesis. And today we have people who are, are Israelis who are of Jewish descent, and they've come back to this place that they believe it was the promised land, the land that God promised them. And there's a lot of tension in the Middle East based on these stories that the fundamentalist Jews are pretty convinced that God gave them this land and they should be there, and everybody else should just go to wherever. And this land was sort of schlepped up by in the early 1900s and kind of stolen in a sense from the folks that were there, the Palestinians, and so there's a lot of tension in the Middle East about the Promised Land. There's also tension between the various Abrahamic religions over who owns the Jerusalem and these sorts of things. So all of this is still playing out today based on these few Bible quotes. Christianity, let me move on. It really sort of got going 100 AD, around there, maybe a little bit earlier. Certainly, you would put it back on the birth of Jesus, at 0 AD, whatever. One of the big things there is the fall of man early in the Bible in Genesis 3, 6 through 19, and maybe you'd like to read some of this.
When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. How far do you want me to go?
Oh, that's pretty good.
Good.
But so basically, we have Eve and Adam eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And this begins kind of an episode where it's kind of a just so story, where we have this little story as explaining why life is hard for people, why we have to grow our own food, and why it's not just sitting out there for us to eat. And so this story is really sort of these people back in history did this horrible thing, and we're being punished for it, and that's the reason. That's the justification of the story. But Christianity spins this and adds more to it, and they basically say, well, no, this means more than just that. It means that these people are going to, they're damned to hell. They're not just going to die, they're damned to hell because they don't die. The serpent didn't lie in this story, which is interesting. And that Jesus is the cure. So the whole reason for Jesus' existence is to compensate for this fall of man, and of course Adam and Eve is complete fable. So Jesus rests on this earlier story. If there was no fall of man, if there was no Adam and Eve, then Jesus doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So that's,
it doesn't make a whole lot of sense even without that.
Doesn't make a whole lot of sense anyway. So let's move on to Islam. Islam was created in the 7th century, and there's some interesting things that go on in this lineages, especially there's actually a lineage in the Bible that gets blessed by God that is kind of forgotten thereafter, and that is Ishmael. So Abraham had 2 children. The first, there was some tension with Abraham and his wife Sarah, and let me read a kind of amusing little quote. This is Genesis 18:11. Now Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken with age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women.
I wonder what it is.
Yeah, I love that. This is pretty amusing. So she didn't have it anymore, and she couldn't bear children, which is what I'm trying to say, right?
Oh.
And so Sarah ended up donating or giving her handmaiden Hagar to Abraham as a new wife, and he sired a child with her, which is Ishmael. So Ishmael is the first child of Abraham, but Sarah later conceives because of another miracle, and she
the well wasn't quite as dry as we thought.
That's right. So she by the way, these stories are going on when she's like 90 years old. So, and he's quite a bit older than that. So it's amusing how old these people are and how little rambunctious things they're doing. Anyway, good on them. Anyway, So there's this tension between who's the first child and who's the most important child. Isaac is the child with his first wife, who comes later. And so there's this tension set up in the story, which interestingly plays out in the real world with this tension between Islam and Judaism. So Judaism claims to be descended from Isaac, and Islam claims to be descended from Ishmael, and both are blessed by God. And there's these big tribes going on, but the story of Ishmael kind of peters out, and it's kind of left there dangling for Muhammad in the 7th century to come and pick that up and spin a yarn based on that. And there's so many begots in this Bible that you can pick anybody in there and say, oh, well, you know, we're descendants of Shem, or we're descendants of whatever, right? And you know, just pick a name and you can spin your own religion. And that's more or less what Islam did. What's interesting, I think, is that it was pretty accepted early on that Ishmael was the ancestors of the Arabs in North Africa. So anyway, so the relevant Bible verses here are Genesis 16 through 9, 9 through 15, and the promise of a great nation is in Genesis 21, 17 to 21. I don't know if it's worth going through reading the quotes, but there's quite a number of great nation. So one thing that's kind of interesting is there is some disagreement within Islam about which child was sacrificed. We'll talk about the sacrifice of the child in more detail later, but Islam claims that Ishmael was sacrificed to God and was going to be sacrificed, and Judaism claims that Isaac was supposed to be sacrificed to God. So there's a little bit of a tension, you know, our child is the one that was going to be killed, that sort of thing. Another thing that's kind of interesting is in Mecca there is a very, very famous shrine called the Kaaba, K-A-A-B-A, and it's a cube-shaped building, and it's where it's you know, when the Muslims pray to Mecca, when they bow their heads 5 times a day, that's what they're bowing their head to. And this building is supposed to have been built by Abraham and Ishmael. And so it's the most holy place in the Muslim religion, and that's how this all gets hooked up. In Islam, Ishmael is considered a prophet. So let's move on to Mormonism, which has started in the 1820s. We're getting to all the fresh religions, fresh and new. Okay, Mormonism claims that there was this lost tribe of Israel that came to America, and in particular it was Joseph's tribe that came to America and founded Mormonism. It became the basis of Mormonism, and this is just pure BS. This is just one of the many things in Mormonism that's just patently absurd. Raelianism, 1974. This guy is he's kind of a kook that people pay way too much attention to. Rael Vorlorn. He claims that the Elohim, who is the creator God mentioned in Genesis 1:1, you know, that created the earth. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and that's the Elohim. This Vorlorn guy claims that the Elohim were actually a race of space aliens, and that they created humans via cloning. So all of these religions have their hooks back into Genesis. And when I talked on episode 587 about rolling your own religion, one of the things I was talking about is the fact that, you know, you don't have to start from scratch when you're rolling your own religion. You just hook it onto an established religion and spin it off into some interesting direction. And that's what we see with Christianity, Islam, Mormonism, and Raelianism in just this one book of the Bible. So we get a lot of spin-offs out of that. Why don't we break and
Actually,
go
just the first 17 or so chapters of that one book. Of the
right,
Bible.
right. So why don't we break and go to some callers,
Okay.
and then we'll come back.
All right, we've got Mike in Tampa. Hello?
Mike in Tampa, can you hear us? We must have bored him to tears.
I don't know. I'll put him on hold because I'm not getting a dial tone. We'll see if he's still there. Damien in Chicago? Hello?
Uh-oh. Do we have...
I wonder if we're having a technical problem. But I'll put him on hold too. How about Tommy in Newport News?
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Tommy.
Hi, Matt.
How you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
All right. Hey, I'm doing well. I'm just calling about the authorship of Matthew. Last week you mentioned that Matthew is anonymous, and I just want to note for you that Tacitus' annals are also anonymous.
Yeah.
And we get our first description to Tacitus from Tertullian 100 years after the fact.
Yeah.
But for Matthew, our first description is from Papias, only about 50 years after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to know how that's not special pleading for you to deny the authorship of Matthew when we have actually better evidence for Matthew than we do for Tacitus.
I'm not saying that the authorship is necessarily wrong. I'm saying that we have no idea who the author is, and if we find out secondhand, as we would find out from Tacitus, etc. Can I finish? You asked me a question. Sure. I mean, I've already seen your video where you agree with me while you're disagreeing with me. But
well, no.
Sorry?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And then you adopt a particular tone at the end of your video that makes me sound like I don't sound. And so I like the fact that both of the videos are up there so people can go compare, because it was a bit silly. My point was, when you're judging the authorship of the book by the standards that we would normally use if we were judging any other work from history. Right. However, that has nothing to do with mythical claims. And you cannot say that we can go ahead and say this is Matthean authorship based on the same standards that we might use somewhere else, and then also say, therefore, the stuff is necessarily true. My only point was that we don't have an autograph. We don't know who the author is. The names were ascribed by the church, and there are reasons to believe that Matthew wasn't the author because there's no reason for an eyewitness to rely so heavily on other accounts.
Matt, could I just address that real quick?
Sure.
You mentioned that it was mythical, but I just want to note here that Matthew is actually ancient bioi, and that's become the consensus since Richard Burge authored his book, What Are the Gospels? And that's how the Gospels are actually biography, and they are intended to be history. They are not midrash. They are intended as historical documents.
And how many other history books do we consider true that talk about zombies?
I'm sorry, but this is a presupposition against miracles you're making, and you're going on a human argument.
No, it's not a presupposition against miracles.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. What it is how do we determine whether or not a particular claim is justified? Even if Matthew wrote the book, and it was written by an eyewitness, that still doesn't mean that the events actually happened.
Hold on, Matt. You said even if it was written by an eyewitness, that doesn't mean it actually happened. But here, I think, why doesn't it mean it happened? Because it mentioned zombies, quote unquote.
Yes.
But yeah, I know you said that, but you deny Christianity.
Okay, stop. There are people living today who you can walk over and go talk to, who will tell you about their experience of being abducted by aliens. Would you believe them?
Now, I've actually investigated this because...
Would you believe them?
Can I finish, please? Actually, the experiences with aliens, almost all of them, or at least all I've investigated, come from later hypnotic accounts, and they're actually using hypnotic suggestion onto them. So it is not at all similar because Jesus was not a hypnotist.
So you're saying there are no accounts, no testimonials that aren't the result of something like hypnosis?
Not of alien abductions, no, sir.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, but you're just wrong. You're making yet another broad-based claim that there are no one of these. You've done this several times.
Give me an example to the contrary, though.
I gave you a hypothetical. What
about...
Stop. What about all of the other claims of other religions that claim miracles? Do you believe them as well?
No, sir, because the evidence is totally different. Now, you might refer to...
No, the evidence is not different.
Could you provide me an example?
The Quran?
No, the Quran was not written by an eyewitness. It did not include miracles. Actually, the miracles are found in the Hadith, and even Muslim scholars dismiss the Hadith. Miracles are not found in the Quran.
Really?
Really.
Okay.
So you can't provide me an example, can you?
Off the top of my head, can I provide you an example? No.
Well, you seem to you claim to know the information well, but you can't provide me examples. And your entire denial of the
I don't
resurrection...
have to provide you examples of other religions. I'm talking about what standards of evidence I would use in order to determine whether an account is believable or not. And an anonymous book, even if we think we might know who the authorship was, which is not necessarily the case, talking about miracle claims is not sufficient evidence to believe the claim.
Why not?
Because why should it be? I heard from some guy, or you tell me that this happened to you, and I have no other evidence other than your word that this happened. It's not sufficient to believe that. If you use that as a standard of evidence, you would be believing all sorts of contradictory claims and all sorts of unreal claims.
It's much more likely
if that is
it's
an
made up.
acceptable standard of evidence for you, then it's not surprising that you find this stuff convincing.
Matt, you said that I would be believing all sorts of contradictory stuff, but you couldn't actually provide me an example of something else. So
I did. You said it's not
No,
there. I don't have an encyclopedia at my fingertips, so I cannot provide you the counter, and I'm trying to save time.
I've looked into it. It's not there. It's not there. So please don't make claims that you cannot back up right here.
I didn't make a claim. I asked
you did. You said I'd be believing contradictory things. You have not been able to back that up. I
said if you used that standard of evidence, you would be in a position to be believing contradictory claims.
What other claim would I believe by this standard of evidence? What other claim?
Last week, the angel Moroni appeared to me and told me that you were going to call the show. Do you believe me?
No, I don't, and I can tell
Why
you why.
not?
But I've got. But
why not? You have nothing other than my claim.
Can I finish the statement, please? Okay. The reason that I believe it because a popular theory to the resurrection is that the disciples lied about it, and this is refuted by social factors.
That's not my theory. That's not my theory. I see no reason to address it.
I know. I'm about to make an analogy. I'm about to make an analogy. Now, my theory on why you would say that is that you're lying for a specific purpose. Here we have a motive, and we don't have social factors like kinship to refute that. We don't have you dying for your belief, and we do have good attestation, but I'd rely mostly on kinship here. We don't have that kind of evidence, and so the evidence is far better for the disciples than it is for your claim that Moroni visited you last week. Far better.
How is it better? I understand what you're saying about ulterior motives, etc. But you have a book that you don't have any originals of, that you aren't positive who the author is, with claims in it that aren't supported by evidence from elsewhere.
And a long history of spin.
And a long history of other people, of motivation for propagating these particular stories.
Okay, Matt, you said, well, we don't have originals, and I just want to put out we don't have any originals from any manuscript of antiquity. That's special pleading there. You said we don't know who the author is.
It's not special pleading because I'm not comparing it to other things in antiquity. I'm talking about standards of evidence.
That's the entire point, though. You're applying a different standard of evidence to this document than you are for others.
No, I'm not, because there aren't other documents that I would accept that make these claims.
So then any document that makes miraculous claims is disavowed by you automatically.
Yes.
Right? Okay,
yes.
So then how can you claim to be an atheist based on the evidence if you're automatically going to dismiss every piece of evidence to the contrary based on the fact that
I did not say I would dismiss every piece of evidence to the contrary. What I said was that if I would dismiss texts that made that claim. If there was additional, you better let me finish or I'm going to hang up on your ass. If there was additional supporting evidence, that's the point that I'm getting to. Is how do we go about establishing whether or not a claim is supported by sufficient evidence to justify accepting the claim. Text alone, whether it's from an eyewitness or a purported eyewitness or somebody who knew an eyewitness, is not sufficient evidence for me and for, I don't know, a court of law or science or pretty much anybody who's not willing to believe anything they read. Text alone is not sufficient. If there were additional evidence that went along with it, that is worth considering. However, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If you tell me that your name is Tommy, I'm willing to accept that on face value with no other evidence required because, for one thing, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your name is Bill or Steve or whatever. It makes no difference to me. If you tell me that you have a pet dragon or a pet dinosaur, that is an extraordinary claim, and I'm going to require more than just your say-so. That's what I'm talking about as a standard of evidence. You put words into my mouth saying that I was willing to dismiss all evidence, and that's not the case. I dismissed a specific type of evidence as insufficient to supporting the claim on its own.
Okay, yes. It seems to be done, so I'll address it. Okay, you said, well, it's not extraordinary evidence, and you say it's not textual evidence isn't extraordinary, but I say it is extraordinary. It's a totally subjective criterion. You can make extraordinary mean anything you want it to mean, and then dismiss any type of evidence you want to dismiss. That's why modern philosophers, do not use ECRI, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, because it's a totally subjective method of assessing evidence. I say that kind of textual evidence, which is multiply attested within over 5 books, that is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 1 Corinthians, is extraordinary evidence. You say, well, we can't accept it because it's textual evidence, but that seems totally arbitrary. Why can't we accept it because it's textual evidence? There's no real reason. It's a non sequitur. There's no connection between your premise, its textual evidence, and conclusion. Therefore, it's not sufficient.
Are you done?
Yes, I am.
If you find that that is exceptional evidence sufficient to justify it, then that's your issue. If that's what you find sufficient to justify belief, there's nothing I could possibly say to respond to that. I find that insufficient, and I cannot begin to fathom how people could really find that sufficient.
Could I respond? Could I respond?
Sure.
Okay. And now you say, well, I find this sufficient. You don't. So are you acknowledging that objectively atheism is not the most reasonable? It will depend on the person.
No.
You're acknowledging.
First of all,
you said it's subjective.
Hang on. First of all, what does atheism have to do with this? This is a rejection of specific claims in the Bible we're talking about, which says nothing at all about atheism.
Okay.
By the way, Jews reject this, and so does everybody who's not a frickin' Christian.
But you're saying that denial of Christianity is not objectively the most reasonable position. It's only subjective, dependent on what one's standards are, right?
And each individual determines what their standards of evidence are.
Could I ask you why you're on this show preaching that atheism or that denial of the resurrection is very reasonable, and that people who accept it are irrational? Because that's what I've heard from your side, and I just want you to acknowledge that denial of Christianity is not objectively the most rational position.
I have no reason to comment on what is objectively. When I'm on the show and I talk about the issues that I talk about, I'm expressing what my views are, giving my reasons. When people call in, I ask them, please tell me what you believe and why. And we can then have a discussion, because you can, if your evidence is sufficient to justify your belief, then convince me as well. And if I find that your evidence is lacking, then I'm not going to be convinced. Now, whether or not you're getting on sketchy ground when you start talking about subjective evidence versus objective evidence, because there's a number of different ways that you can look at this. What I'm talking about is whether I am not only convinced that my standards of evidence are sufficient to weeding out what is true from what is false, that they are, for the most part, as good as I've been able to discover at doing this particular job. There's a reason why the scientific method requires certain things. Now, there's still an aspect of subjectivity even there, because you, for example, could, and I have no idea if you do, reject the scientific evidence for evolution or Big Bang cosmology or whatever. I have no idea if you do or not. I'm not trying to put words into your mouth. But that is your particular assessment of the evidence. However, working in conjunction, we have established recognized standards by which we make determinations. And those standards, while they would be perhaps subjective in the sense that there is a group of individuals who are debating about what standards should apply and then establishing them, at the point at which they have become established, then they're objective, because they're no longer dependent on any individual.
Okay, let me just respond to this real quick. You
Sure.
said, I just want to clarify, first of all, I do wholeheartedly accept evolution. I do not deny that at all, and the Big Bang, of course. And second of all, you said, well, we have but you said we have recognized standards by which we judge the evidence.
Right.
So, now, don't apply the scientific method to history, because science...
I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
Okay. So, I'm just going to ask you, which historical standard that is recognized by a consensus of historians states that textual evidence is not sufficient to establish miracles? Which historical standard? Citation, please.
I have no idea. Is there a historical standard that says textual citations of miracles is sufficient to say that they occurred?
But you were citing specifically your denial of miracles and objectively reasonable using standard historical standards, and I'd say William Lane Craig in particular cites 6 criteria for assessing historical evidence, which are accepted by mainstream historians, which the resurrection passes with flying colors.
No. Historical standards aren't. You're saying that there are historical standards
Like historical methods.
that would confirm, that would state that textual reports of miracles is sufficient to believe that the miracles occurred.
I think that's a corollary of the fact that there are mainstream respected historians who accept the resurrection.
Are you going to answer the question or not?
You said,
Are there historical standards that would state that textual reports of miracles are sufficient to accept that the miracles occurred?
Okay, and here, I think you're the one who has to say that there are historical standards which exclude that, because I'm not the one being excluded.
No, I don't, because my historical standards exclude that, and I'm unaware of any historical standards that would include it. I'm asking you to give me an example of one that does include it, because that's the only way that and by the way, actually, that wouldn't make a bit of difference, but I want to know if such a standard exists, because I'd like to have the rest of the historical community explain this to me as to how this one particular standard could ever say, oh, it's reported in a book and there's a number of different reports about it, and the book itself, we can probably say that it was authored around this time by this person, therefore zombies got up out of the grave and walked into Jerusalem.
Well, you asked for a specific historical standard, and sure, I'll give you one.
Okay.
And William Lane Craig cites 2 main criteria, which is explanatory power.
Why are you bringing up William Lane Craig?
Because I'm about to finish my sentence. Hold on just a second. William Lane Craig cites 2 historical standards which are accepted by the mainstream of historians, and you can see it's from a book called The Historical Method, which is not written by William Lane Craig. It's just him citing it. And it's 2 of the main standards are explanatory power and explanatory scope. And mainstream historians, credentialed, respected historians, like N.T. Wright, Craig Evans, etc., will use these criteria to establish a miracle. So because mainstream historians
sorry. They don't. They don't use the standards to establish a miracle. They use the standards to establish that they think that the text is reliable, and then they assert that the miracle occurred. You cannot demonstrate that a miracle occurred without actual evidence of it. Text alone is not sufficient.
You just stated that you wanted a standard used by mainstream historians.
Yeah, and you gave me William Lane Craig quoting 2 criteria.
I gave you mainstream historians like N.T. Wright, who is respected by people as far left as the Jesus Seminar, who uses these criteria to establish a miraculous event. I don't see how this is not fulfilling your criterion. A mainstream historian...
You don't see how this is not fulfilling my criteria?
You wanted a standard that establishes miracles by historians?
I don't want... Okay.
Hello?
Wow. You're giving me names of people who accept that text reports of miracles are sufficient.
Yes, I am.
Okay, that's not what I'm asking for.
That's what you wanted, though.
No, I want a historical standard, not something that a few people or a couple of recognized scholars happen to think is the case. I want a standard, and I want a standard that is a matter of consensus.
Sure. Okay. Explanatory power, explanatory scope. Now,
but you can stop.
Explanatory and explanatory scope. You got an omniscient
no, stop.
God did it.
Stop.
Therefore, it's true.
Stop. No. Hang on. Please. You can stop, actually, because it doesn't matter. If there was the Princeton Guidelines for Historical Review that was a consensus report of all of the historians, or 90% of the historians on the planet, and this guideline said that if there is a textual report in antiquity that, despite whether or not we know who the authorship is, attests to the actual occurrence of a miracle, it is therefore considered historically reliable that the miracle occurred, I would still reject that.
So, like a creationist is willing to go against scientific consensus, you're willing to go against historical consensus, right?
Yes, because history isn't science, as you admitted earlier.
Well, actually, history is a soft science technically, but I'm not going to go major on that. It's just a technicality, really. But so basically, you're saying
any science that asserts that miracle claims are justified based on somebody said so is not a science.
So I have a question. You basically are implying that science is the only informer of truth. I get claims of miracles from...
No.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that the
there a higher
scientific
form?
method, the exercise of logic, reason, and evidentiary standards is the single most consistently reliable method we have for discerning
Yes.
truth from fiction. Nothing else has ever been demonstrated to do better.
Right, and that's referring to philosophy, like logic and reason. And philosophy gets those claims of logic and reason and such. And let me just say that mainstream philosophers as well, and this has become the philosophic consensus, however you say the adjective, this has become the consensus that humane arguments against miracles are not sufficient, and that's why philosophers like Alvin Plantinga have now
Alvin Plantinga, can you cite anybody who's not an apologist? William Lane Craig, Plantinga. I mean, we've already talked about in previous episodes his modal version of the ontological argument. I mean, can you cite somebody who's not already a Christian apologist who buys this stuff?
Like you want me to cite people?
Well, no, I don't. No, I don't.
Okay,
because it wouldn't matter. To be fair, it wouldn't matter.
So do you want objective criteria or not?
I want criteria that meets my standards of evidence.
What are your standards of evidence, and why are they superior to all others?
My standards of evidence are, I couldn't possibly list what they are because for every claim requires different standards of evidence. Not all claims are created equal, as I explained to you before. However, the scientific method is probably the baseline that you could use for establishing this.
The scientific method is derived from philosophy, right?
Possibly.
Experience.
It's derived from actual experience.
Which is based on philosophy.
No, it's not based on philosophy. I mean, apart from everything is based on philosophy, you've got no basis for that.
Yeah, well, everything is based on philosophy.
Okay,
and
fine. Thank you for proving me right.
No, hold on. Could I finish? Everything is based on philosophy, including science, which means that science is literally enslaved to philosophy.
No, it's not. No, it's not, and that is the dumbest stuff anybody has ever said in the show.
Dumb.
Go back and watch the episode where I debated tag with Matt Slick, and we can talk about logical absolutes, because I'm not going through all that again. But philosophy, for example, has within it this idea that the senses, for example, are properly basic, something you're probably familiar with.
Yeah.
I reject that claim entirely. The reliability of the senses is constantly re-verified by their application and by their comparison with the other senses and with other information from other people's senses. That's why they're reliable, not because they're basic.
You're saying that the senses prove the senses. That's circular, and that's why
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not circular because I don't stupidly oversimplify it all as the senses. If, for example, there is this cup here, I don't know if you can see it because you may not be watching the stream, and I can see it with my eyes, I can touch it with my hands, I can hear it. If it's a bottle of Coke, I could hear the carbonation escaping, etc. I can see the condensation, I can feel the temperature, I can taste it. It's the interworking of the senses that allow me to create an entire model. But I can also hand this same cup over to Don and have him assess it with his senses. And when we find that we are in agreement, that is where we converge on what we are somewhat justified in asserting as a shared reality. But all of this is far and away removed from the stuff you were talking about before. Science is not this assertion that everything is a slave to philosophy is both true and false in the sense that everything is dependent on philosophy because philosophy tries to get to the ultimate source of it. But it's not like if philosophers decided or came to a consensus that textual accounts of miracles should be considered reliable, that science would suddenly start claiming that lab results that reported, bunnies climbing out of test tubes should be taken at face value. That's just not the way reality works.
Okay, well, you refer to science as like testing miracles, quote unquote, and I do love science. I'm not trying to diss science in any way. I accept evolution. So, but
I don't know how much you accept it if you're going for miracles in text, but
well, I have an account devoted to defending it. But science presupposes methodological naturalism, and that's a principle I agree with.
Right.
Methodological naturalism,
yes.
but not metaphysical naturalism. So science literally is unable, it is banned from testing miracles. So for you to claim
It's not banned from. It's not banned from testing miracles. It's not banned from testing miracles. No, sir.
In method, it must be natural.
No, sir. In method, yes. In method, it's methodological naturalism, but that doesn't mean that it's banned from testing miracles. If the miracle is something that manifests within reality in any way, it is therefore detectable and measurable by naturalistic methods.
It is? Even if it happened in history?
No, not if it happens in history, because one of the founding principles of aspects of science is repeatability.
Yes, that's right. And so you're claiming that
it's about prediction, not post-diction.
You're right about that.
I know I'm right. And I was right in 5 of the things in the video or so, I'm guessing, I'm making up a number, that you pointed out you wanted to argue against, and you said, oh, he's right, and then you argued against it. You know, we could have probably had a much better discussion if we'd have just picked a point and worked from it. But the funny thing is that when somebody directed me to the video, you seemed to complain about what I was reading from when I talked about the authorship of Matthew. Do you remember doing that?
I'm not sure exactly which point you're referring to there, but
you said, I don't know what he's reading from, but it doesn't seem to have it quite right.
No, I don't remember referring to you reading from something. It didn't seem like you were reading from anything. What I was mentioning...
No. Well, okay, I'm sorry that you don't recall what you said in your own video.
Okay,
but you did, and for the record, what I was reading from was the cover page for the book of Matthew in the New International Version of the Bible.
Okay.
And you objected to it. Now, that's fine. That's fine. You are entitled to object to it. I have my objections about it as well.
I was objecting to your use of the, like, you saying that it's internally anonymous, therefore we don't know who wrote it. I was objecting to that because I pointed out several examples of works which were internally anonymous.
The thing is, here's the thing. There's a difference between saying, give me your first example again, where we learned the authorship from Tertullian.
Tacitus' Annals.
Okay. There's a difference between accepting, like, for example, if Don wrote something, and I knew that he wrote it, you know, a particular essay on the website or whatever, but it was anonymous. And 10 years from now, when somebody comes up to me and says, hey, we want to write a history of, you know, what the ACA did, etc., and we've got this, you know, particular essay here that we liked and we'd like to use, can you tell me about it? And I say, Don Baker wrote it. And they record that, and 1,000 years from now, somebody comes along, there's absolutely no risk or price or cost or loss or anything worth tiddling about on my assertion that Don wrote it or on somebody else's assertion that I asserted that Don wrote it. Because the fact that he wrote it doesn't make any difference. It's much like the discussion of what did Socrates actually exist, or was it an invention of Plato to use as a mouthpiece? To me, it doesn't matter. Because what matters is the words that are attributed to him. Do they have value? Are they true? It doesn't matter to me at all whether or not Socrates existed. And so if a historian, you know, half of historians say, yes, he actually existed, and there's sufficient evidence for it, okay, fine. And if the other half of historians say, you know what, there's not sufficient evidence for it, so I don't accept that Socrates existed, that he was real and the author of this, I think it was Plato. Okay, fine, it makes no difference to me because the words that are spoken are either true or not true on their own.
Okay,
the authorship of Matthew is, or any of the Gospels, is such that the only sense in which it matters who the author was is whether or not we're going to claim that this was an eyewitness to it. Not that having an eyewitness necessarily makes the claims true, but there is definitely a reduction in reliability between an eyewitness and hearsay of an eyewitness. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I would agree, but I wouldn't say secondhand evidence is totally, we can't totally throw out secondhand evidence.
And when did I say that?
I was just clarifying. I didn't say you said that or anything.
Okay, fair enough. I wouldn't say that either. So at least there's one little area that we agree on. So now we've got a book, for example, Matthew. In most books, most accounts that we would assess historically, it wouldn't matter to me who the author was. It wouldn't matter to anybody. It might be nice to know who the author was, and it could be reported by somebody else that this guy was an actual eyewitness. But then when we go and investigate, there is the issue of why would an eyewitness rely so heavily on other accounts, which I know you're eager to answer that. I'll let you get to it in a second. But when you address this, it's one thing to say that from the standpoint of normal historical methods and validation, I find that the claim of authorship is justified. And somebody else could say that I find the claim of authorship is not justified.
And that's what the debate is about.
That's what the debate is about. And I'm stating that I'm of the opinion, based on what I've read, that there is sufficient reason to question the authorship.
I know, that's why I'm calling.
And that's all I claimed in that video. And you're admitting that there's a debate about this, which was all I was claiming. And I even got specific and said I don't want to get into the issue of the historicity of Jesus or the specifics about the authorship. Because all I'm saying is that you cannot claim that this is necessarily so. And if you then go and expand to not only, as many believers do, claim that this is necessarily the author, but then to extend that to this necessarily happened, you have committed a huge violation, at least by my standards, of what one should do when assessing evidence for claims.
No, not at all. But now, what the debate is about is, by these historical criteria, did Matthew write Matthew? And I say yes. I say there is absolutely extremely good reason.
And I say I don't know.
I know you say that.
So why did you get so upset? Because I said I don't know.
Dude, I wasn't upset. Someone asked me to respond to it, okay?
Well, why did you attack me as if I said that he didn't, when you know I said I don't know?
Because you said we don't know who wrote it, and that's essentially a claim that we have no idea who wrote it.
No, it's not a claim.
Okay,
it's not a claim that we have
about?
no idea. It's not a claim that there's no debate. It's not a claim that there's no discussion. It was a claim that I don't know who wrote it, and neither does anyone else, at least existing. Somebody probably knows who wrote it. You're convinced that you know who the author is. You've been convinced by some set of evidence. Not everybody's convinced. There is a debate, as you've already admitted. You knew that my position was I don't know, and yet you debunked it as if I asserted, in your own words, that we have no idea. Why did you do that? Why so dishonestly?
No, it wasn't dishonest. What it
was.
Could I respond? My rebuttal was to you said, well, I don't know who wrote it. We don't have enough evidence to determine who wrote it.
Right.
Right. And so I was saying, no, not true at all. Let's look at your reasons why it's questionable. Let's debunk those. Then let's look at some of the positive reasons why we do know who wrote it.
You didn't.
And
you didn't debunk them.
Yes, I did.
You asserted positions the opposite. As a matter of fact, to just be fair, because this has gone on stupidly long, and I'd be happy to take this offline and have a conversation with you by email, but I want to be as fair to you as possible.
Okay.
So give the YouTube account where you posted this video so the viewers from this show can go watch and see what your rebuttal was. Okay. And we'll also make sure that there's a link up to the specific episode that you're addressing. So when you make fun of me with your pseudo-mongoloid voice, they can actually go watch the original video to see that I did nothing of the kind. So what's the YouTube channel?
The YouTube channel is youtube.com/KabaneTheChristian. The YouTube video is entitled A Reply to the Atheist Experience on Matthew.
Yep. All right, there you go. And we'll see about getting a link up with the other video. But Tommy, for now at least, that's way more of the show. There's two other people on hold that have been on hold for a long time, and Don's got a topic to go to, and we're getting nowhere.
Thanks for taking my call.
Sure, thanks. Sorry, Don.
Well, that's fine.
I wasn't sure that Tommy was necessarily going to call in. Somebody pointed me to the video where he decided to debunk something that I didn't say, and then go on. But in any case, you can go.
So this is a YouTube response to some clip that
from
one of our shows.
Yeah, where I talked briefly.
Yeah,
briefly.
I should mention that we have almost 800 clips that our fans have put up.
Wow,
it's just astounding. Thank you.
Yes, and by the way, the short YouTube clips are the ones that seem to draw in the most people, which means the clip of that discussion will never make it on YouTube. And I apologize.
You might be surprised.
This is something that let me touch on this for a minute. I don't want to talk through the whole show. You can get back to your stuff, and we'll take more calls. The show's been on for about 11 years. I've been doing this for 4 and some change
Years.
approximately years. We get lots and lots and lots of email, and some of it is laudatory, some of it is critical, some of it is pointing out mistakes that we've made in the past. And I've repeatedly thanked people for pointing out mistakes. We will, if it's a serious enough mistake, correct it. For example, I got an email recently about a show that Don and I did 14 months ago for Easter, where Don made a mistake when he was talking about Horus as having 12 disciples and born of a virgin. And it turns out that the site that he'd gotten his information from just was inaccurate. It was another one of the astro-theological first part of zeitgeist nonsense.
We make mistakes too.
Yep. And it's a mistake that deserved to be credited. But the bulk of what I didn't bother coming on here and saying, oh my gosh, 14 months ago, Don, you said this and it was wrong, because it really didn't make a big difference. The bulk of what Don was talking about in his points about the production of mythologies, the adoption of religious festivals and ceremonies from other cultures, and the way these things transfer around, they were all valid. And it wasn't in the slightest bit diminished by the fact that we got a name wrong or whatever. But I go out of my way on many occasions to put on my Christian hat and play theist advocate. When, for example, and I hate to keep picking on Don, if Don comes on and starts talking about something and it goes a step or so further than I think it should from the standpoint of a Christian about maybe painting people with a broad brush, I jump in. When it comes to claims of the historicity of Jesus or the authorship of the Bible or any of those things, I'm not a historian. Don't claim to be. Matter of fact, I don't claim to be an expert on anything except my opinion, and I'm fairly decent at explaining how I got to my opinion. Far from an expert even at that. But when I come on and I bend over backwards to say, you know what, here's the NIV, this is what it says about the authorship of Matthew, and this is something that isn't known by most Christians, because most Christians just assume Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, oh, they were written by the apostles.
Some serious biblical scholars that have done that, right?
And right there, I mean, go crack open an NIV, read what it says about authorship. Go to Wikipedia. It's generally reliable on subjects like this. Read what it says about authorship. My only position was it is unjustified, in my opinion, to assert that the author is X if we don't have sufficient evidence to say that. And if there's Bibles printed that say we don't have sufficient evidence to say that, and there are debates, as even the person who wanted to disagree with me admits that there are, then my statement was completely justified. And if you go watch his clip, you'll see that he'll claim that he debunks everything. And in actuality, he simply asserts. When I point out that there's no contemporary eyewitness testimony to any event in the life of Jesus, this old tired canard has been debunked I don't know how many times, it's nonsense. And that's it. He does not explain why the lack of contemporary evidence, he doesn't, as a matter of fact, he doesn't dispute that, but he doesn't explain why it's tired. And it's not tired.
It might be tired to him because he doesn't have anything to say.
The fact of the matter is, if the only reports of Elvis we had were written 5 years ago, and people were claiming he was still alive, it would be completely justifiable to say that there are no contemporary accounts. Actually, Elvis is probably a bad pick because we're close. George Washington. If we had no record of George Washington and no conversations about him, and not even any claims of any eyewitness testimony until 65 years ago, it would be justifiable to say, you know what, we don't have any accounts written during the time that he was supposedly alive. We can't even be sure that the claims of eyewitness accounts are coming from eyewitness. Anyway, that's way too much time.
King Arthur's a fine example, right?
Yeah, and there were plenty of people who believed, Paul Bunyan and other things, that were, just because your particular mythology became incredibly popular. And by the way, I'm going to have to look into whether or not there's miracle claims in the Quran, because I'm not going to accept your word for it, and the same reason I'm not going to accept the anonymous author of the book of Matthew when he says that zombies got up and crawled into Jerusalem. Brains.
Russell did that, yeah. We got some call. I feel real awful that we have some callers from the beginning of the show. They're still hanging in there. What a bunch of troopers. Let's take
I'll
those
try.
calls.
Is Damien in Chicago? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you so much for waiting. I'll shut up now.
Huh?
I said, thank you for waiting. I'll shut up now.
Oh, okay, thanks. What's up, Matt? What's up, Don?
How's it going?
I called in about 2 weeks ago with 2 minutes left in the show and wasn't able to talk about what I'd like to, but and I have work pretty soon here, so I'm not going to have a whole lot of time, but I'll try to get to my point quick.
Okay.
I just wanted to talk about the existence of faith and how that might not be irrational or
The existence of what?
even the
The existence of what?
a faith.
Satan?
No, I think he said faith.
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 Sorry.
Faith, yeah.
Sorry.
Can you hear me too well, or should I?
No, you're
Is that a
fine.
bad
You're
signal,
fine.
or-
Keep going.
Just me.
What was that?
Keep going.
Oh, okay. I like to think of myself as a pretty rational guy, and I don't take a whole lot of things without sufficient evidence. Like you said with the last caller, if someone tells me their name is Tommy, then I have to agree with them that their name is Tommy because it doesn't matter one make a difference. But when we get into things like the metaphysical, things that are not manifested in reality, some people submit that you can't believe in them, and some people do believe in them.
Can you give me an example of what you mean? I mean, because
Something metaphysical,
when you say metaphysical as something that doesn't manifest in reality, my first response is you should go watch the Supernatural Transcendent Dice that Tracy brought in, because if it doesn't manifest in reality, you can't say anything at all about it.
That's true. We can't say anything logically.
So
about
why would it
that.
even be a subject of discussion?
It's a subject of discussion because of the existence of faith.
So
Because there are people who want to make claims, right?
We have people asserting that there is something which doesn't manifest in reality, which they can't say anything about it, but they want so desperately to say something about it that they do. Okay, how is this different from a delusion?
It's almost no different from an illusion.
Okay.
Yep.
But still, these people believe in this, and I'm one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it's very hard to describe because it does not manifest in reality, and our language is based on things
Might
we
say
see.
impossible to describe.
Yes, it is very impossible to describe.
Very impossible.
And I guess you just have to take it on faith.
Why
if
would
you're
you
capable
have
of
to
it.
take? Why would you have to or want to take anything on faith that it doesn't manifest in reality? You can't say anything about it. You can't know anything about it.
My point isn't that you should. My point is that you would have to if you do believe it.
Oh, I agree that if there's no manifestation, that's the only way it's taken on faith. I'm asking, clearly you think this is something you should do since you do it, right?
I'm not saying it's something you should do. I'm saying it's something that I do.
Okay, so why do you do it?
I do it because I have faith. I mean, it's a circular argument. Faith exists because I have the faith. There's no rational explanation for it. I'm just saying that it does exist, and I do have it.
Okay. So you do something that you recognize as irrational, just because it's a part of who you are, and you note that there's no reason that you don't necessarily think that I should do the same.
But if you don't feel you should.
Okay, so I guess we don't have any problem other than whether or not you take actions based on these faith claims, actions that apply to other people, then we'd have a problem. But apart from that, I wish I could convince you that it's probably not a good idea to, believe things on that sort of non-evidence. But you and I don't really have an issue.
Well, there's nothing I can really think of that I don't base on rational evidence other than this one sort of box I have. I've heard it referred to as the God box. It's the one space in your brain that some theists can't turn off, and it creates the faith within you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'm trying to say is there's no problem with people having this faith as long as they don't act on it and they don't do anything. They don't act crazy because of it. They don't.
As long as they don't
themselves
act on it. As long as they don't act on it, I'd completely agree. Unfortunately, the truth is that we do act entirely based on what we believe to be true.
This is
Now,
It's hard not to act on it, yeah.
it's impossible not to act on what you believe. There's a hierarchy of belief. For example, I might believe that it's wrong to steal, but that's a general broad-based rule. For example, when New Orleans is demolished by a hurricane, all of a sudden stealing in order to stay alive does not fall into the same category. It's a more specific example, and you could look at it as perhaps a pyramid of here's my baseline belief, and then the exceptions chip away until we reach whatever point I wouldn't. But on some level, if you believe something, it's going to do two things. It's going to affect what else you find believable and are willing to accept, because it automatically is, you have within you some criteria for assessing reality that it differs from the rest of your criteria, and it has to affect that to some degree. Some people may be able to minimize it almost entirely, but there's still no overlap. Number two, it's going to affect actions that aren't overruled by other beliefs. So I don't know specifically what your claims are that you take on faith, so I couldn't possibly assess what harm. It may be so vague and innocuous that you're not doing any identifiable harm, but there is a problem in that. And by the way, this next part is my opinion. I think I can justify it.
all right. Yeah.
I care about what I believe. I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. Therefore, it's in my best interest to find a method that produces that sort of mindset, that allows through as many things that are true while blocking as many things that are false. And the reason for this is because, as I explained before, my actions are dictated by what I believe. And I don't mean that. I explained that enough already, I think.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you're living in reality, and the reason for all of this is because if you're living in reality, as I think we are, the best...
I don't think you can make the claim that you don't live in reality. That's a very fair claim to make.
You'd be surprised at what some people think I could get away with.
We get into this sometimes.
But in any case, in order to make decisions, I think my opinion is that the best decisions are made when your view of reality is as accurate as possible. Would you agree with that?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
All choices you make are better when you know the truth. Is that sort of more of a layman's way of saying the same thing you just said?
It might be, I think.
When you know the truth, every action you take is therefore necessarily better?
No, when I'm saying when you're making decisions about what to do in reality.
All right.
You're going to make better decisions the better your worldview, the more accurate your worldview is with reality.
When we say when you take actions in reality, we're talking about anything you could ever do, from something as mundane as step forward to something as detrimental as taking heroin?
Sure.
All right. So the more information you have and the more true information you have, then every decision you make is better for it?
Yeah, that's kind of my position.
Okay. I guess I'm sure I could think of some situation where if you knew something that was a lie, you would make a better decision. Better is such a subjective term, though, that I don't think you can really make that claim. I don't know. I don't want to get into the semantics.
It may in fact be circular, because my definition of better may have something to do with consistency with reality. But what I keep looking for is somebody to give an example where having a distorted view of reality helps you make a better decision.
Well, the term better is so subjective, I don't think you can ever make that claim.
Yes, it's still my standards of better, but I would think that, we would pretty much agree in most situations as to what's probably better.
I'm sure. I mean, I guess I think murder is wrong. Do you believe murder is wrong? And in every case where I would murder somebody, I would say no. So in every case that has to do with murder, I guess we would agree, correct?
Well, now you've got to define what murder is.
Murder is killing someone with the intent of actually killing them
Then no, it's not always wrong.
When would it be?
I don't know, war?
Yeah, the old war and self-defense.
War, self-defense. I mean, if you come at me with a gun and I've got a gun, I intend to shoot you before you shoot me. I don't consider that murder. I wouldn't consider that murder, which is, I'm just objecting to your definition, but I also wouldn't consider it morally wrong.
I would consider it self-defense, but still murder.
Okay, then do you think it's wrong?
It's in some degree. To some degree, I believe it is.
Okay, then we're in disagreement there.
Yeah, regardless of the circumstance, taking another human life is not okay.
Okay, I happen to disagree with you. I can probably come up with a dozen circumstances off the top of my head where I actually think it would be okay to take another life.
And that's just a moral decision. So that's also completely subjective. We can't get anywhere arguing about that.
Oh, I disagree with that too, but I think that's the only way we've ever gotten anywhere is by having discussions.
Okay.
There may not be an agreement,
my morals,
but the discussion's worthwhile. Right?
Yeah, my moral views of things weren't always what they are now. They changed based on new information and based on discussions with other people. You know, my view on for example, abortion was primarily opposition because of the particular religious upbringing I had. That view is one of the views that definitely changed afterwards, after I abandoned my religious belief. But it didn't immediately just switch to the opposite. What happened was I had to sit down and consider it. Is this right or is it wrong? And in what circumstances? And why? What's my justification for thinking that? And that was the result of thinking about it and talking about it and considering what other people's views were and what their justifications were, and in having a view that was as consistently accurate to reality as possible. Anyway, we've hit 5 subjects. Was there something in particular you wanted to hit?
I just wanted to talk about the existence of faith. I think I pretty much hit on that topic in the first 5 minutes.
Okay.
Now I'm sorry I have to go, but I have to get ready for work right now. I have it in about half an hour, but I'd love to give the audience my email address if they'd like to email me.
Oh, no. Once upon a time I would have let you. It turns out to be a really bad idea. I don't think you have any idea how many people are watching the show, but when we had the Bad Atheist show, and we talked about the Foolish Atheist, sorry, and we talked about the guy who was suing over bumper stickers, he's still getting email, and so are we. And by the way, if you're watching the show, please stop emailing both of us. Leave the poor guy alone.
It's gone on long enough. Yeah, you don't.
I don't mind.
These shows live on for a long time.
They're on the internet forever, and I don't mind giving out a web address or a blog or something, but I'm not giving out people's email addresses and certainly not phone numbers. But you're welcome to call back in anytime you want.
All right. Also, Jeff D, I think last week said he had something to talk to me about. I don't really remember.
Yeah, it's because you called in to say that God loves us.
I didn't call in to say God loves you, but I ended up saying that because we only had 2 minutes left.
Yeah, he's got some comments about that. But
all right, well,
I'll let him make it. And actually, if you email, by the way, it's a good time to pimp our email address, tv@atheist-community.org. If you email that, I'm sure Jeff would be happy to discuss that issue with you.
You know, I did, and the only person to drop me a line about it was you.
Okay, well, you know, Jeff's busy. I'll see if he wants to talk about it.
I think we had a little snafu about Jeff being on the list or something.
And there were some emails that were bouncing, but I'll see what I can do. Email me again, David.
All right. Also, do you know when the next time he's going to be on is? So I'll just call in then, really.
A month? Well, no, actually, he won't be on again.
We have a 5-week co-host rotation. And
this is a good time.
On our website.
This is a good time to mention it. Ordinarily, it'd be 4 weeks from today. However, next week is the last episode of the Atheist Experience that is guaranteed to be live using the current rotation and studio because Public Access Studio is closing for a good chunk of the summer. We're going to try and continue the show by broadcasting, streaming it from various people's homes, and
we'll see how that works.
Ustream, keep an eye on Ustream. We'll see how that works, and posting recorded shows up on the net.
So it's a challenge to us to see if we can make it go.
We don't know yet, but we'll definitely be back.
Watch the website
into August or September. Yeah, hit the ACA website for more information. Thanks, Damien.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Well,
Keep going with calls, man. We're on the home stretch at this point.
I was going to say you take this one. Is this Josh?
Yeah. Hello?
I was gonna have Don take this one, but I don't think you're going to let me.
Hello?
I'm confused. Go ahead. What do you got for us, Josh?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First I wanted to say I've been watching your show on YouTube for a while. I really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
We have full episodes on our website that you can find. Okay.
Yeah. And I saw. First, let me say that I'm not. I'm not in any religion formally, so I don't have any like fundamental beliefs. And I agree with a lot of what's said on the show, but there are a couple points that I see that are made over and over on the show that I disagree with. And I think what happens is sometimes people call in and they're not really good at articulating what they're saying. So
excellent. Give it to us.
So one was about infinite regress. A guy called a while back. I think it was with Matt and Tracy, and he was talking about how, if time is infinite in the past, that you can never get here. And then Matt said that it was an application of Zeno's paradox. And I think in terms of, I just don't understand, I don't understand the whole idea of it being an application of Zeno's paradox, because if time's infinite, I view Zeno's paradox as basically breaking up finite time into infinite parts. If there's an infinite time past, then I don't really see how that's an application of Zeno's paradox.
And other people didn't either and challenged me on it.
Matt got beat up on it.
I still hold that it's true, because the critical aspect of Zeno's paradox is the flaw in there is attempting to use infinity as a quantity, which is exactly what you're doing when you talk about infinite time in the past. It's a nonsensical phrase.
Right.
So the analogy, I think he meant it as a looser analogy than a lot of people interpreted it.
I did go on and was adamant with the guy. I'm pretty sure if this is the call that you're talking about, where I was, yes, this is Zeno's paradox in that kind of sense.
Right.
And it was because I wasn't expressing what I wanted to actually say clear enough. No, it's not one. His example is not specifically directly analogous to any of the three Zeno's paradox. But the problem that presents itself that we identify in Zeno's paradox is the same as the problem that he was identifying, to me.
Right. Yeah, okay, I think, that makes sense to me. The other thing I wanted to talk about, why I still, and I try to approach it from a totally rational standpoint, instead of having any, emotional, letting my beliefs be dictated by my emotions. But the one thing that I have difficulty with, and I think another caller touched on this, but he didn't really articulate it that well. I think it was a guy named Rubin called in and was saying, how many species are there in the world? And then
he called in a lot and asked that same question a lot.
Right, and the thing is, he just didn't really get to the meat of but what I kind of feel about that is that I think the way humans live and the advances that humans have made is so far, in my opinion, beyond other animals, and the feelings and emotions that humans have are so far more developed than other animals that there's difficulty in accepting that it just evolved out of that.
Sure. Sure, and these are valid questions. It's like, why are humans so successful? Why are humans so smart? Why do we have so many complicated structures? Why do we build such intricate societies? These are all wonderful questions, and there's branches of science that are trying to answer these questions. A lot of people think they're good questions and valid questions, and just go look at it. And we've got some very good answers, I think, in many cases.
While that particular issue is one that seems to be troubling to some people, it's really a bit of special pleading. It's a little bit of prejudice, because the answer to what makes us better in these categories that we're going to, by the way, we're going to pick the categories and we're going to find what is better, in those categories that we've picked, and with our definitions of better, what makes us better, it turns out that the answer is the brain, the particular type of skills that our brain have evolved. And because this has happened to us, we consider it an amazing thing that has prompted many people to say this just couldn't happen by evolution alone. There must be a God tinkering in it.
Yeah.
And by the same standards, it's difficult to make a really good analogy. Somebody has used to elephants, they might think having a long trunk is the pinnacle of God's
See, but this is touching on something where I did. Sorry.
I understand. That's why I said it's difficult to make a good analogy, and part of it's because of the obvious bias we have, and the other part is that we're not just making up the standards. When it comes to, we have no natural predators left for the most part. We are, for the most part, in control of our environment. The most likely thing to kill us is us, maybe an asteroid.
Yeah.
And that puts us in a position that not only do we consider special, but that I think almost objectively would be special. The problem is that to say that being in this special position, the fact that anything is in this special position, or us, makes no difference. The fact that there is anything in that particular special position in no way tells us anything at all about whether or not the natural process could or couldn't have led to that. You have to actually go and investigate.
Right.
And the investigation
it raises
shows
questions, right? It raises valid questions.
Yeah.
Right? And
I think, though, the thing is that I would have to disagree, and this was one of the, I can't remember who it was, but one of the hosts' response was exactly what you were saying, is that it's kind of like a special pleading in that we're deciding what's better. I think the host said a lion could pretty much kick our asses, which is true. But I think that the traits that humans have developed are the ones that lead most to advancement in I think it's an objective, I think we're objectively more complex and advanced than any other species, to such a degree that it almost seems evolution almost seems very hard to accept, even though the evidence is there for it.
It seems implausible. Yes.
Right.
And
I mean,
that's where a lot of people get tripped up.
Honestly, and I'm not just saying this to be difficult, I don't find it implausible.
Okay.
I do though. This is one area where I do understand how people could find it to be implausible. I just don't happen to find it implausible. I have a different perspective on this than
right.
I guess.
I just think of all the great artwork and stuff like that, and I know it's an emotional argument, not really but for me it just seems like there's something in humans that is beyond the natural order of the world.
We are demonstrably better at modeling our reality than anything else we know of.
Right. The other thing, the last point I wanted to make, and this kind of relates to it.
Actually, you don't have any time left because we're off the air in 30 seconds. Thanks to everybody for watching. I apologize for running on it late. Thanks for calling in. We'll be going down to Threadgills shortly. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come down and join us. You don't have to be a member to attend as long as you don't come down to preach, proselytize, or provoke. I had to get that in before the show was over. See you next week.